Okay, let's have a look at how this is built. So let's undo the couple of screws back here so you can see I've got a few pads just to make it flat, but then I've got a lot of little screws that I need to undo, so let's undo those. And then as I take those out, so the bottom one I haven't soldered them together. All I wanted really is a plate. It'd be possible to solder them together, but I just didn't bother. So you can see here's one coming out. Then the last one is going to be a little bit trickier because it's it's one for my my wireless Bluetooth. I call it the backpack, and the way it's actually set up is actually very simple. It's because we've got all these matrix pins on the edges, we essentially connect right on the edge right here. So I'm gonna undo this one here, and it's not gonna come off easily because of those connections. So here's what it is. Okay, so let's just be careful for these pins here because that's where all the connections are done. There it is. So this 4x4 backpack is essentially a Bluetooth like microcontroller here. That's an NRF52832, and then essentially I'll turn it on, and then it runs off of a CR2032 non-rechargeable battery. I've got this to protect against shorting against the pins there, but that's it. So this is the backpack. So let's have a look how the rest of the keyboard is all set up. So let me just gonna use this here as a pointer. So when we have this set up, when we look at from the top, the connections, and I don't have easy ones. I've got some like 5x5s that would essentially be exactly the same way, with the exception that it's slightly larger, obviously. So this is a 5x5 that you can connect 3 together, as opposed to this one it's possible to connect 4. So the way it works is we've got, and let me just kind of show you here, this is a different one. This is the different version of this. So the way it works is we've got the matrix all connected together. And the way I've done it is I actually put them flat like this and make sure that they're really tight together, and I just alternate, you could say, a staple off every other one. So you can have a look here. I can see a staple from the top every other one, and that kind of gives still a little bit of flex this way but it won't pull this way. Then I essentially solder align it, like the first 2 are critical because that's how it actually lines up this way. But then when solder every other one from one side, then you flip it around, and then you essentially put stitches or again staples on the other side. So that this way you actually get your full connection. That would look like this. So you see right in here, I've got alternating like the pins poking out, and then the jumper, pins, jumper, and so on. It goes all the way down. As I said, the first few are very critical to get the side to side. Also, I would need to kind of like push like lengthwise so that it's actually very tight together as well. Now, so this is the same is done for both sides here. And when you do it on the very flat surface, it actually helps such that it doesn't bow out, it doesn't bend, it doesn't look like a S shape or anything like that. So the first step is to essentially connect the boards together. Then, if you are using the micro, what you need to do is to essentially solder the sockets, or just either the sockets or the header, but do not solder the micro yet, just like a Pro Micro. Now, what you'll notice is the connector is going to be coming out to the back, but then there's a little square pin here. You need to make it match with the square pin, and it has to be. So if you look carefully at this one here, it has to be on the far right, and here's the reason why. So if you look very carefully, the top row of connectors, they're connected together for the full length, and then these are for essentially scanning the rows. Then the one on the left here says column here. So essentially this would be mapping out to the column right on here. And then if you can see here, there's these MX labels. This is essentially pointing up, where the switches get installed. Now, the other piece, you look carefully, there's column right and column right. So this one being the one located here. Now, if I connect this one here, so that means column to the right. So that means on here, it actually is for this one here. So that's why when we get to these two here, they're connected together. These two here are connected together. Then the last one here connects to this one, which ultimately, if you look carefully, it's going to map to this one. Then I'm just going to add a couple more here. So start the last. So this one here, then it goes to this one, and then ultimately it's going to be here, which is, it says a label column here. So through the matrix, it actually travels diagonally, such that the column here, it goes to these columns there individually, and it travels back the signal this way. So where you connect your micro is always going to be completely to the left hand side of the keyboard. So it's right here. Oops, so it's right here. So once you've got, and let me just kind of go back here. So once you've got your whole board set up like this, and then you've got your 2 rows of headers set up, then this is where you flip it around, and then you can go and install the switches through the plate. Now, it's usually easier to install these standoffs, because there's a tiny hole through the switch to get the screw through. Now, you probably will not have access or be able to push the screw through, so it's just easier to install these standoffs before the switches. Once we've got the switches done, or not the switches, but the standoff done, then you essentially line up your plates, obviously with the holes to match up with where the screws are, so that if you need to tighten them, you'll be able to access those screws. And then you start pushing switches through. And then the switches, usually they kind of go in, you gotta make sure that they're nice, flush, and tight. Then you can go and slowly solder all the switches all the way across. Once you've got your switches done, and then what I recommend is to program your micro to make sure that you can flash it and you can program it, because you can see here there's no reset pin or anything. And once you know that you can flash it, then and you know that it works, then you can actually install it again on the left hand side here. Install it so that you have the square pin here matching with the square pin on the micro, and then you'll be able to have your whole keyboard working. So hopefully that works regarding the this. Oh, actually, one thing, diodes. So before you install the switches, before you install the standoff, it's actually just after you're done your stitching in between the boards. This is where you're gonna go and install the diodes, and the diodes usually, like for these boards here, it's all the if you look at this one here, so it's the diodes. You can install it from either side. It doesn't really matter. But the important piece to remember is if you solder everything and then you realize that the diode is the wrong way around, if they're actually stuck inside, you won't be able to test it, or you won't be able to replace it. So it's kind of useful to actually solder the diodes or install the diodes from below the board, not from the top, in between the switches as I have them here. So it's really hard to tell here, but yeah, you could probably see a little bit right there. There's a couple of diodes that shows up right there. So if I would have to replace these diodes, I would have to completely remove all these switches here to be able to replace these two diodes. So that's why like putting a diode from this side is easier if just in case, so that you can actually easily unsolder the diode and pull it out and then bring a new one in. So stitching, diodes, then you can do the header, then the standoffs, then the plates, the switches, test the micro, and then you can install a micro on here. Now, one of the key difference with the wireless piece, as you can see here, is instead of connecting a micro, I actually use the final edge here to be my connection. So what I have is essentially use these pins to connect with the matrix, and then with that, I don't have to install anything on here. All I need to do is essentially install that as the first base plate, and use these other ones as just like filler plates to have everything level, so then whenever I put it on the board, it's all lays flat. And that's about it. So hopefully that helps on how it's all done. And that's it. Okay. Now I'll have to put it back together, which should be pretty easy. So the first one is this one here. And I gotta line 16 pins all together. This is the more difficult one to do because it's 16 wires. There it is. Okay, and then it's just a matter of lining these guys up. And I'm gonna put this way. Okay, and then put the screws back in. Now it's possible to essentially solder these together as well on the bottom plate, but just for simplicity and then ease of access, if I ever need to go in there later, it's easier. And for me, I'm actually working on firmware for this and different version of this, of the Bluetooth one, and it's just easier for me to go about this this way. So this way I can easily replace from one version to the other without having to unsolder everything. It's just like essentially this one part that comes out. Okay, so I'll go through all these guys here, and then now I just want to make sure I've got it. Yeah, I've got it the right side up. Now, the board has been designed with 6 screws per. Oh, this one doesn't have one, obviously, so it only has the 4 corners, which is more than enough for supporting the board. And the last one, right here. Okay, so these are very clicky switches. So yeah, and it's unlike some of the boards like the Contra, where you can actually put a dual here, a 2U with a single switch. This one is essentially complete 4x12 with two different switches. Oh yeah, this is loud. Okay, well, hopefully this helps a lot, and then have a good day.